Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Dawn Zoldi. I am the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting and your host for the Dawn of Drones podcast. I've got with me Clifford Cruz, the CEO of Skyway, and I'm so excited to talk to Clifford today. We are going to have such a great time. We're back from AUVSI. I feel like it was yesterday, but also a million years in the past. What an incredible event, and I saw Cliff there. So many other people in industry. We kicked off this whole month of advanced air mobility and vertical flight there with Quantum Systems, our sponsor, and Dave Sharpin, CEO, was our clubhouse guest to kick off the month live there, and then he was on the podcast last week. So if you missed that and you missed any of our podcasts, go back to DroneLife TV on YouTube and check all of those out on demand. Not only that, but subscribe if you haven't yet, because you can watch all these and then you'll get the notifications when the next one's up. So Cliff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So met Cliff a couple times, and we talked a little bit about this on Clubhouse last week. By the way, reminder about that, Clubhouse, all those audio recordings are available for replay. So go on Drone Law Connections and check that out. It was a spectacular, crazy conversation, Cliff. And we're gonna have to repeat some of that because some folks maybe dialed in now weren't there. But also to elaborate on some of it, because well, let's start with Cliff first of all, everybody. I'm gonna grab my notes, and because I'm old, I'm gonna grab my glasses. And these are some of the scribbles from my hotel room last week as we were doing the Clubhouse with Cliff. Let's see. Became a pilot at the age of 15. In 2012, was already running drone conventions in LA. Expert in quantum mechanics. Let's see. Has deconfliction airspace software is what he's all about right now. Data exchange. That doesn't do justice at all to your bio, Cliff. In fact, Miriam McNabb did a spectacular write-up in DroneLife today to kind of announce this this podcast. And so I'm going to let you explain a little bit about your background, because honestly, when you were running us through that last week, my mind was blown. I remember Myra, who's a regular on there, she was just like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. So go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself to give us some context.
Yeah, I guess, I've gotten a lot that it's not, I'm one of very few people that come from the Valley that's getting into aviation. So it's CV is very unique compared to, some of the aviation professionals in this industry. But yeah, my background is actually in inventing, products and services, enterprise products and services. So some of the early stuff that I've done is, stereography, camera work in the early days of the 2000s, up to cryptography work for government contracting, and cloud storage. I did a lot of entropy work, which is where the quantum part comes in, and that was in the early 2010s. Then radio surveillance and using SDR radios in radio communication. And then now aviation, which is really fun, I think, than being stuck in a data center and in a room. You're actually outside looking at computers fly in the sky, basically.
Yeah. So for everybody that just heard that, if your mind isn't blown, I don't know what actually would blow your mind, because, just the wide breadth of experience and knowledge you bring to the table. I have to say, Cliff, I'm not just pandering here, and no offense to all my other guests combined, but I feel like you're one of the smartest people I've ever met on the planet. And it's just incredible the way your mind works and all the things you've been able to master so far in your lifetime. So tell us, what led you to this journey in aviation? Before we talk about Skyway and what exactly the company is, what led you to aviation? I mean, you obviously had an interest. You became a pilot at the age of 15. What was that journey that led you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so like the early days, I, w- I was always around aircraft, and aircraft always became a part of my life. But computer science was more exciting as a young person. And the boom of the tech boom of the early 2000s and early mid 90s was quite a time to be in. So getting into that and understanding um, electronics and hardware engineering kind of led me to some working with some really great people and getting recruited into companies, working on really innovative projects, and then I became known amongst people as if you had a problem and you couldn't figure it out, you'd hire Cliff, right? Get Cliff in here,
Fix it
and
guy.
basically, yeah, or come up with something new, right?
Yeah.
So, in the likes of like the 3D systems, we took a different approach into figuring out interocular convergence in the cybersecurity world. I took a different approach of using photons and room temperature equipment versus using liquid nitrogen to gain entropy, and using that in a cryptography state. And then when it came to radio communication, instead of using physical switches, we used digital switches and invented a multivariable cloud antenna that allowed the device to kind of automatically, like digitally, physically adjust its antennas according to which band it wanted to like scan.
Wow.
And that was kind of like some of the fun innovations. But I got to work with really smart people from different parts of the industry. So it was obviously always a pleasure to meet, working on different stuff. And in aviation, I'm meeting all kinds of really great individuals who have been in this industry for years, that are teaching me, right? And I'm learning a lot of the pieces to the puzzle here in aviation that are missing and need upgrading, and all the opportunity, honestly, really, to just evolve the aviation into a whole new era. So that to me is what's exciting. So
Well, and you're doing it. So you've taken your knowledge and experience in all of these different disciplines, and you're bringing it to bear on this critically important issue of air traffic management. So tell us about Skyway. How did it come about, first of all?
yeah, so Skyway, originally was we had a well, Skyway was tossed into a bin of a lot of different technologies that I had cooking up for many years. I remember seeing drones in the early, 2000s being a thing, and at the time I was working on other stuff. So, but it was really exciting to see where that was going, and kind of just forgot about it. But up until a few years ago, we looked back to try to see where it went, and we realized that it needed a lot of help, and it needed the valley approach, than aviation. And one thing we saw was that a lot of the investments that were being made were people who were in aviation. So the CV matched the CEO. In this case, more than 90% of the companies in the space are people who have done something, built a plane or some sort of software, but no one from the valley. So you're missing a lot of the key elements of what made scalable enterprise solutions. So we came in and said, oh, we have an opportunity here to really turn the pancake, and rethought of this whole thing from the ground up. And so that's what.
Well, you're indirectly hitting on a critical issue, Cliff, which is this issue of diversity of thought. Obviously something that I advocate from every perspective. But even this idea of aviation history mindset versus the Valley kind of enterprise mindset. And having the two of those collide in what you're doing in your company is really significant because you bring that success in the past to bear on what you're doing now. So let's just like kind of dumb it down because like I'm a simple person. I'm going to digress for a second. You and I have had some funny conversations. I was
Yeah.
just thinking about Tropic Thunder and Simple Jack. It's just come up in so many conversations lately. I don't know why, but let's just kind of keep this super simple for people. At the heart of it, if you had to give the 30-second elevator speech on what Skyway is, what is it?
So if you looked at it's essentially a cloud system designed and tailored for tech startups and that want to get into aviation. So rather, if you're building a drone company or some sort of solution, booking solution, I don't know, the sky's the limit. So what we've done is we're putting all the work to build an infrastructure that is certified, by the FAA, that meets all the regulatory requirements, and giving that as a service, as an API service, right? And so what you're going to get now in the coming years here, as we expand and grow across the country and internationally, as we turn on services, is that you'll be able to get the critical components for you to do your business, your drone business, or your eVTOL business at pennies on the dollar, right? And so what we're trying to accomplish is making the industry blossom a bit faster by not having these startups carry a large financial burden on things that they don't really have to build themselves from the ground up anymore.
Okay, so a cloud, API kind of service model. So let's give maybe some analogy so people can get their brains around this, because that sounds pretty broad. And I know you've already talked about your background in cybersecurity, in radio communications, and all of it. So if I'm a drone company, what am I hiring Skyway to do for me?
So let's say you want to build a drone that, delivers froyo, right? And so you spend, let's say, $5 million of your working capital on hardware engineering for a really nice drone that has like some sort of refrigeration system in it, right?
For frozen yogurt. For those that don't know what froyo is.
Yeah, it's a frozen yogurt, right? Yeah, treat, right? Or any form of ice cream, right? Like, sure. That's what we're trying to solve. So you don't, when you look at your budget and your R&D budget and patents and trying to build a business around a piece of hardware, getting it up and running as a service and starting to provide some sort of customer base. What you don't want to spend $5 million on that is traffic regulation, airspace management, emergency recovery, weather services, data privacy policies, data encryption systems, all of the above encompass of putting an infrastructure in place for you to just operate, right?
And Cliff, so, just not to interrupt you, but I just want to inject this just so I understand. So this is external to the actual drone hardware. In other words, I don't have to be a drone OEM, right? I don't have to be a drone manufacturing company to work with you, although they can. If I'm a drone company providing a service, as you say, drone delivery as an example, I would hire Skyway to do all of these things, basically the one-stop shop to put together that interface. So like from my perspective in my workplace, what do I see? What do I have that, and what are you doing behind the scenes that's making all of that happen? So like, do I have an ops kind of command center? And is that something that you've created that interface for? Is that mobile? Like, tell us a little bit more about the vision there.
Yeah. So, one would argue like, oh, UTM, right?
Yeah.
And but in this case, you don't have to have an entire operations center watching all your aircraft and vitals and things like that, right? The way we see it is, um, there will be companies that will buy large amount of drones from drone manufacturers, and they will lease out these drones to Starbucks, and they're managing the aircraft's maintenance. They're replacing them, they're leased, right? You get
Okay, got it.
another better drone that came out, right, on your lease. And so those operators will, they don't want to deal with, the traffic part of it, or the authorization, or if a drone goes down, recovering it, right? So from an insurance policy perspective, risk management, overhead costs, they just connect their platform and their services to Skyway, and now you have this entire operations center, right? That's handling all of those risks for you, right? So it's
Wow.
basically
Okay.
handing off all your risk, right, into Skyway. That way you could just focus on building a better business and not having to worry about that part of it, right?
Yeah.
So we're giving you those advisories and we're handing off. And so we're not selling just a software. It's an operations center. There's people there. You look at our website, we have our pod, right, which is where our navigators sit, right, which is our employees that are trained to operate in these things. And they interact with the airspace and all of our customers and clients, right? We're taking care of that all for them. So you can kind of see how that could, be a very helpful business to a lot of these companies, and to our current customers now. They love it, right? They're using it, and we see that scaling.
So I want to talk about two things. Number one is you mentioned these navigators. I know on your website you've got a cool picture of kind of the egg-shaped chair, and they're in front of the ops center, and you're calling them air traffic navigators. And so in essence, you've created almost an entire new workforce for this industry that currently doesn't exist except for through your company. And I think it's really brilliant. The second thing I wanted to mention is this is not aspirational. I mean, you just mentioned you have current clients. So let's talk about one that's pretty visible. You were actually sharing a booth, if I recall, at AUVSI with
Uh,
certain.
we didn't have a booth, no, but we were often there.
Yeah, you're kind of your folks were hanging
Yeah,
out
we're
there.
we're always hanging out there. Yeah, yeah.
So, and this is out in the public, so this is not state secrets here. It was Zing, right? Zing Drone Deliveries.
Oh yeah, Zing guys. Yeah, yeah.
The Zing guy. So Zing has been doing great things. I jokingly, I think one of the first things since they're I think from the kind of the Louisiana area, they were delivering beignets,
Yeah.
across the river there within
Right.
line of sight as one of the first things. And I think in Miami there was like literally a mic drop, at some big event, from a building. The drone came
Yeah,
down,
yeah. They got
gave
some
the
cool stuff
host the
out there.
microphone. What exactly are you doing with Zing right now? Just kind of as an idea for people to get their head around. Okay, this is how it works. This is what they're doing.
Yeah, so Zing's one of our partners, and we're innovating a lot together on they're stress testing our systems, and we're adding more features, right, as needed, which has made that partnership really great. And
Yeah.
I one aspect that they're using us is the deconfliction aspect of it. So we have been working on very heavily on um, airspace separation, yeah, amongst other clients. So it's the data feed between other aircraft information in the sky, and then
Okay.
also we partnered with True Weather, so we're also grabbing localized weather into our system as well, and then we're also bringing in a lot of other aviation data, and doing our analytics. Our secret sauce, I guess you would say, or our IP is what really makes it shine. It's kind of hard to explain here, but it's grabbing all that information and making a best low risk possible outcome for the aircraft, and giving that flight authorization that is, going to make it nominal for that aircraft to do its mission. So
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now with them.
Oh, that's amazing that you're already doing it with drones and drone delivery specifically. And I know you've got aspirations once these larger eVTOL aircraft start taking off and vertiports. And I do want to talk about that, and I want to talk about cybersecurity. But before I do that, so you mentioned true weather solutions and this kind of integration of weather into what you're doing. How is this working vis-a-vis the FAA? Because you just mentioned kind of airspace deconfliction, getting even approvals. Are you an interface right now, like for Lance or the FAA directly for Zing or similar clients as part of your holistic solution?
Yeah, so we're really trying to allow UTMs to leverage us as well, given the fact that we have other services outside of that. So we don't anticipate doing Lance, because it's kind of like not in our wheelhouse to do one-off flights. What we're trying to do is do a more of an ecosystem that helps company like leverage their operations, right? So in those circumstances, it's up to Zing to get his authorization. But when it comes to like data and things like that, that's where we come in. That's that cloud service type of thinking, right? And airspace monitoring, that we kind of come into play. Though, Skyway, we won't say we're never going to do it. If we need to pivot or into any of those areas, we'll definitely look at it. But for right now, here in the States, there really is no, intent sharing right now. And that is critical, I think, for the industry to blossom. It was one thing that I voiced to NASA and the FAA about. It's one that I've been wrangling a lot of industry fellows or fellow companies to come together to solve this problem. Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to fly in the same space. So that's one major aspect of it. Now we have the ideas. We're coming out with our con-op on that front. We also are coming out with a paper on low altitude TFR for public safety and some of the encryption standards there. So we're actively trying to move the industry forward for everyone outside of our own ambitions.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that in Clubhouse and the fact that you're very heavily involved in some of the standards bodies. ASTM is one example. You just mentioned working with the FAA directly. I guess how is that going? Because you said you're doing a white paper, you've had these discussions. We talked about this idea that so many people want to hold their information close to the vest, but for this to work, when I say this, like this entire ecosystem for drones to really fly, like information has to be shared between companies. Like you said, you can't have, I don't know, Skyward won't be doing it now. We can talk about that in a second. But you can't have a UTM company and another UTM company with drones in the same, let's just say, area of responsibility that somehow aren't talking to each other. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree. Europe is in their U-Space program. They're obviously a little ahead of us on starting a preliminary data network sharing. Though that's a good step forward. The United States airspace architecture looks a bit different, and some of the words that are coming out now or discussions that we're in kind of seem that it's going in a slightly different path, which is not a bad thing. Obviously, the best system is whatever comes out is that everybody can work with is going to be the one we should work with.
Right.
But I think the key point here is, the latency is one of the biggest concerns I have, and the technology behind the stack for whatever the government decides to put up for us to ensure our intent. And the reason for that is, if we take a legacy approach for commercial aircraft, ADS-B or taking that information through a radar system of some sort, that's a fine and dandy when you have, aircraft miles apart from each other, right? A few seconds delay on your screen is not a big deal. But when you're dealing with aircraft at low altitude within hundreds of feet of each other, that type of delay could really, cause a lot of chaos, right? Especially if we're depending on, not just one system, but like hundreds of other software vendors and systems shoving data into this thing, right? So, it's think about it like a bunch of straws. You have like a group of 20 people at a table, and everybody has a different straw in one shake, right? Like, so it's that has never been done before in aviation, let alone a high volume transaction system like this, right? Even the stock architecture.
Well, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it, Cliff, because when you look at the UTM ConOps 2.0, right, the NASA FAA joint document, essentially let's just call it outsourced UTM, right, to private industry. If now there's this idea of, well, we need to kind of pull some of that back, we need to have federal control. Okay, great. But number one, we both know, and certainly with my experience in the federal government doesn't make systems well, right? That's why they work with private industry. And number two, like legacy systems aren't going to work for new technology. Like you said, they're not going to be fast enough. So if there's going to be, kind of at the end of the day, a winner, like somebody like Skyway that gets the mega contract to build this thing, that actually is technologically sound, feasible, that can, as you say, kind of integrate all these things, and then all the other folks plug into that, the private folks and the federal folks, awesome. If they're talking about something different, that would scare me for a whole host of reasons, including not just the latency, in real time of information, but the latency of bureaucracy and how long it will take to actually make that occur.
I do think, well, the UAM or AAM in this case, even in both circumstances, right? It's a decentralized aspect. I don't think we're going to pivot from that. But so meaning, Skyway will have to compete in the same space, just like everybody else, right? Right. Everybody will have to provide the best service possible for their customers.
Sure.
Now the problem I see is, to your point, yes, if the government builds, a stack, let's say they get, $10 million to build the AAM stack. That's going to be great for that moment in time, and we're all going to be happy for a good decade. Now, what's the plan on expanding that? What's the plans on upgrading technologies as things change, right? And then also, what kind of technology are we talking about when sharing, right? If it's a database transaction policy based on flight plans, well, we have to think about how we build out our enterprise software for that, right? If it's socket-based sharing, right, encrypted sockets, right, which essentially is like a pipe, right, of data, then okay, that sounds great, right? Who's in charge of issuing the encryption tokens? Who's in charge of the
validating? Yeah, and actually, you're pivoting the cybersecurity. I do want to talk about that. We are have 15 minutes left, and I've been really remiss, Cliff, because we've had a bunch of people in the chat shouting out, saying great things, and I do want to take a second to acknowledge that. So we have Dilip Nair saying insightful. Before you go, love the new lighting, Dawn. Thank you. Actually, not super new. I was just stuck in a hotel last week, which is why it was a little bit of a different look. Started this new look this year. Matt Higa says, shout out to Pineapple Empire. Love listening to your voice. Chris Wedgeworth is saying hello. And Brett Federson from the, gosh, I'm thinking of Brett's, he's a retired senior executive service employee and Army guy. Accelerate UM. Thank you. Brain just fired for a second. Brett is with Accelerate UM, and he says, "What's the Skyway website?" But my Oz in the background, our Oz behind the scenes, Mike Peel just dropped that in the chat, everybody. So absolutely go to the Skyway website and check out what Cliff and the team have going on. But let's talk about cybersecurity, because you just raised this idea of, you know, if they build it, what's this going to look like? How's encryption going to work? You know, how, and I know you can't reveal, you know, proprietary information, state secrets right now, of course, but cybersecurity critical. I just saw an article this morning that I posted on LinkedIn about active cyber attacks, of course, on satellites by Russia in Ukraine, in the Ukraine conflict, and how it took out a whole bunch of communications networks. So how's cybersecurity factoring into your system, given your background in that?
Yeah, you know, given that I've come from cybersecurity for well over a decade, you know, the pole is always going higher and higher when it comes to trying to become, you know, cyber resilient. And the approach that we're taking is just the same standard approach that you would take when building a cyber software, right? You have best practices, you follow protocols, you use industry standards when it comes to encryption methods. You know, you don't use the ones that are legacy or older, you know, that have been known to be cracked. And so, you know, following best practices from the beginning is what really toughens you up from a standalone, you know, product. Now, obviously, this product is not designed to take a beating, much like, you know, something from CrowdStrike or any other cybersecurity firm, but we are taking measures on the fronts, meaning the end nodes or the publicly facing areas of our system, to make sure that certain critical systems are air gapped, you know, within our stack. And everything is siloed in a way where, you know, you have to go through several walls to get into it. So we're taking those approaches from the ground up. I could probably bet most companies are not doing that from the ground up,
right?
Which then means that, what does that mean for patches for them when they become compromised? You know, what does that look like as far as you know, disrupting the ecosystem, because in this case, in a decentralized airspace, and this is some of the things we have to think about that's brand new. Honestly, this is why I'm excited about it, because we're talking about a Web 3.0, you know, which honestly we're barely understanding on the cusp of what, you know, on how that works at large scale anyway. And adding it to a regulatory space in the sky, right? I mean, like, talk about, you know, two major challenges in one sitting, which is a lot of fun. I think that's exciting. But it's how do we, you know, critical companies having to play in the same playground, right? Obviously, in Silicon Valley, it's easy if you're building a tech company, because the playground is the internet, and you're not really stepping on anyone's toes. You're in your own Idaho, and everybody comes to you. But in this case, as a tech company, you're playing around in a finite space, right? It's not like the internet, which is, you know, abundant, right? There's only so much air. You know, everybody's got a different technology. We all have to, like, know what we're all doing. I mean, there's this whole coordination effort that is just unparalleled, right? So yeah, that I think is the fun challenge behind all this. But yet, at the same time, from a cybersecurity perspective, there are a lot of questions start to emerge.
Well, you're talking about cybersecurity patches, you're talking about nodes. So at the heart of it, what you're doing is it's plug and play. It's an open systems modular, MOSA, right? Modular open systems architecture that you're building, that, just to be clear to everybody out there, you know, like, you can work with any company. Is that right, Cliff? Like, you haven't just wedded yourself to any particular partner to the extent that if somebody comes to you, you could say, well, yeah, we can't integrate with you, because you're finding solutions to basically be able to work with anybody, whether it's civilian, you know, military, drones, eVTOL, and I do want to get to eVTOL next. We're getting real close on time.
Yeah, that is correct. We're open to working with everybody. See, it's in this times of this type of industry, when it's so new, it's always good for everybody to work together to bring the industry up, right? And in this case, more specifically, we have to. I mean, we're actually going to be playing in the same space, so it's doubled down onto that thought process even prior to business history of needing to work together.
Right.
So yes, we're totally open. We're a part of a lot of groups. If you're building something and want to be a part of like a standard or work on a problem that you're on, we're all for it, right? On getting this off the ground. Because look at it, if we could just figure out the architecture for this all together, figure out the rules of engagement, and how this business model is going to work with everybody in it, then it's all all for the taking, right? Let's play chess. But I don't think we're at that moment yet, right? I don't think we need to start playing that game. We need to figure out how the game plays out first.
Well, I think we could be at that moment, Cliff, because we just saw Congress pass that what is it, Advanced Air Mobility whatever act. I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about, where let's form a working group to tackle these issues. We just saw, right, the Beyond Visual Line of Sight work, Aviation Rulemaking Committee grapple with just the concept of beyond visual line of sight and what that could look like. Can't do it without, obviously UAS traffic management as part of the holistic solution.
Right.
So I'm hoping if someone from Congress or somebody from that group is listening, that they're inviting Cliff to this conversation, because if he's not a part of that, you are missing out. Brett, I think, is pretty plugged into the DC community. So maybe if y'all haven't talked, you need to, you and Brett Feddersen from Accelerate UM. So no, really exciting times. Let's talk about the vertical flight piece of this. And again, I'm like almost done the episode. I have to once again give a shout out to Quantum Systems, for sponsoring this entire month of vertical flight advanced air mobility. Cliff, what they're doing with their hardware, their vehicles, the Trinity and the Vector, crazy. And they have a 2-in-1 thing that it's the Vector is fixed wing. You can pop those wings off and make it a quad. And so
cool.
It's insane what they're doing. And I'm so excited how they're helping Ukraine. And I think they have some upcoming exciting announcements. But thanks again, Quantum Systems, for that. But let's talk about, we got small drones. I agree with you. Like, we're ways off to the larger vertical, eVTOL aircraft and the vertiport solution, and, kind of what does that infrastructure look like? But, your system, your Skyway solution, your, cloud-based software equally applies to large aircraft, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, when we built out the system, like I mentioned on the Clubhouse, every company's right now, anyway, starting out, they have to start out with some sort of traffic system, right? And in what you do with that is what makes your business, right? And so for us, it's we have two products. We have our UAS products and services for them to help their businesses grow, which I mentioned earlier, and then we have our ATM, or air traffic management division, and that's half of our company, honestly, is in eVTOL, and there we're working on what are the standards for vertiport construction and design and development for the industry. We're working with local county states on defining zoning laws. We're working with the people from VFS on regulatory environments there, and then Airspace.
Vertical Flight Society, for those that don't know what VFS is, because there's a lot of drone people here that maybe aren't real plugged into the larger
flight
society, vertical flight crowd. Right.
Yeah.
But Vertical Flight Society, and in fact, Mike Hirschberg, the director, is going to be on this podcast next week. So
Oh, fantastic.
spoiler alert, with Jason Pritchard from eVTOL Insights. So it's going to be another spectacular episode.
Great. Great.
But so yeah, you're working with all of them, and it's so smart to work at the local level because look, I'm in Colorado, and I actually gave a briefing. I'm not even going to say to what group, but you would be really sad, Cliff, to know that they didn't even know what drones did. They had no concept of advanced air mobility. And I'm like, hey, this is the future. This isn't even the future. Like, this is happening. Like, this state over here is already doing it, right? Like, and these people are doing this, and we're doing nothing in Colorado. So not that we're doing nothing. Look, we've got incredible companies here. We got Embraer, right? Is up in Denver as an example. So many. We've got Pterodynamics. They make this really cool drone. It's like a pterodactyl. It's got these wings that are up and then they come out like a pterodactyl. So you can stack them on a Navy ship deck and have a whole bunch of them. So I'm not saying Colorado doesn't have incredible tech companies here. We do. I'm just saying from an infrastructure standpoint, what you're talking about, Cliff, what's so critical, it's not just Colorado. So many states aren't thinking about it. So I'd love to get you out here talking to the right people, honestly. And I'm so glad to hear that you're doing that as kind of a grassroots effort. Now, are you plugged into NASAO, or are you going to be going to the National Association of State Aviation Officials Conference in September?
There's a few conferences we're going to. I don't know if we're going to that one. We'll be at the Florida Airports Council
awesome
conference, I believe, and we're Vancouver Commotion, and then the one in LA, and then a few others, I think, in Europe will be
okay, awesome.
We'll post all of that on our website or on our LinkedIn, or you'll be able to see where those are at. Yeah.
Well, good. And that's probably a great segue to this question then. Like, how can people, kind of learn more about what you're doing, plug into like your next efforts and, where you're going to be and things like that?
Yeah. So it seems like out of all the social media sites, our LinkedIn page has gotten the most attention. Though we do submit a lot of what we're doing on other channels. But if you want to get the latest, it's probably going to be the LinkedIn page. If you don't have LinkedIn, then I believe Twitter gets most of that feed as well automatically, so you'll be able to see that as well. And it's our handle is goskyway.com on all of those, so you'll be able to follow.
Okay, awesome. And just have maybe a minute or two left. I'd love to kind of give you the opportunity to do your 30-second elevator speech of kind of what you want to leave people with as we close out this episode.
Yeah, in light of a lot of the current news, with companies, going out of the race or, consolidating, things like that, it's just a natural part of industry, right? It's a natural part of economics. And there's just so much good happening in the industry, innovation, and companies getting funded, and things happening across the world that it's an exciting time in the industry, right? So though this is going to take a moment, it's not as easy as putting up a social media site and getting a bunch of advertisement and dancers on the screen. This is a much more larger, complex problem, but one that is going to change the way we move about ourselves, right, in a society. And so that is something to really look forward to,
No, I agree. I think, one thing will happen and it's like, oh, the sky is falling. Look, Skyway just shuttered their drone business and, UTM. And then I saw something else like the FAA maybe is re-looking at the way they're certifying eVTOL aircraft. And there was, again, a kind of sky is falling article of like, oh, now all these SPAC dollars, no one's going to invest in these companies. They're all going to tank. And just like, you know what, today, pretty sure Eve Mobility is going to be ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, going public. Yep. So, I'm feeling pretty, confident about the future. And you're right, it's complex. It's going to be a process. But what an exciting time to be a part of it. And it's so great to have people like you, Cliff, to be a part of it and help craft the solutions that are needed and bring that, as you said, Valley perspective to the table, because obviously the Valley has been very successful. And to bring that mindset to this complex problem with all the other things that you also bring to the table in your experience, I think is really exciting. So thank you so much for being here. By the way, everybody, I was talking to Cliff before we went live, and for those that didn't see, we had an announcement this week. Mike and myself, my producer, we're opening up 2 new platforms. One is called Full Crew. It's going to be a newscast. It's going to start on the first Monday of June at 9 a.m. Mountain Time across a whole bunch of platforms. And I just said, Cliff, you got to be on there because your insights are so critical to kind of what's happening. Maybe give some some additional perspective to maybe some of the things we're seeing. I'd love to have you. And then Full Tilt is the leadership, tech industry leadership talks, and those are going to be on Tuesdays, and not only on a podcast, but on Twitter Spaces. So more to follow there. But thank you again, Cliff. Really appreciate you. Thanks for taking this time. Thanks for being here. Everybody, just a reminder, tomorrow on Clubhouse, we do have Jason Pritchard from eVTOL Insights. Mike is unable to because 78 as we speak in Texas right now. So he's not going to be able to make that call, but Mike Hirschberg from Vertical Flight and Jason Pritchard from eVTOL Insights are both going to be on this podcast next week. So absolutely check that out and plug into Cliff, follow him on LinkedIn, go to their website, Skyway, and that's all she wrote, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, Cliff. We're out here.
Thank you.